Got it. I admit for live streaming. Then I see we're live streaming on YouTube already, but I wanted to check with you, Olumide. There's this live stream function for Twitter now where you can live stream videos. I don't know if it's something you've tried.
It's called Tweet, right?
Yes, I don't know if you've tried it before.
I saw it on the YouTube, on the Zoom, but I've not really.
Okay. It's okay. I think our guest was in the waiting room and I can't see him again.
Is it okay? Is here now?
He's here now. Great. Hello, Abdulhamed. Can you hear me?
So you let me know. Should I start this live? Or
I think it's live already. I think you started it already.
But we've not started broadcasting.
But we've not started. Okay. I see. I admit.
But I can see you. You are live now.
Then I see we're live streaming on YouTube already, but I wanted to check with you, Olumide. There's this live stream function on Twitter now where you can live stream videos. I don't know if you...
Okay, Sheyi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just wonder if Abdulhamed can also come activate his audio.
His video audio is already activated. I think it's video that we need now. I think you two of you try to spotlight two of you. So that two of you have exactly.
I can do that and spotlight.
No, it has gone again.
Ah, there you are.
So the essence now is that it can be recorded and people can watch it on YouTube again. Because I noticed a lot of people went back to watch the last one again.
Yep.
Okay. So Sheyi, I think you have the admin now. Let me leave you with, you can kickstart because we don't have much time. I mute my mic and you continue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're very excited to welcome you to this. It's the second in our series, webinar series, where we explore net zero, what it means, what contributions have been made over the years, and we try to project into the future where we're going. I'm excited to host this. Many thanks to Olumide Idowu for the opportunity. On the first edition, we had Blessing Ewa, and she is the country lead for Net Zero as soon as possible in Nigeria. And she gave us a bit of background info into Net Zero, what it means, which was very useful for us to start this conversation. And now as we move forward with this, we're very excited to then zoom in on the role of young people's contribution to achieving Net Zero. Just a bit of background for those of you who are listening for the first time. This is hosted by the International Climate Change Development Initiative. And the idea is to help conceptualize this concept of net zero, to localize it in ways that people at the ground level can understand. And we also understand Nigeria is, part of 137 countries that have made pledge to, achieve net zero within the next 30 years by 2060 or thereabout. And this means there's a lot of work to be done. And as young people, we want to understand what is the role of young people? How can young people contribute to achieving this net zero? My guest today, I hope I can pronounce it right, Abdulhamed Habenelu Idakwoji. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Absolutely. Welcome, Abdulhamed. Abdulhamed holds a Bachelor's of Engineering in Chemical Engineering, and he's got a first-class honors in that, and also has a Master's of Engineering in Petroleum and Gas Engineering with distinction. He's a member of the Youth Advisory Council of the Climate Initiative in the US, and is the country contact point person for the 18th United Nations Climate Change Conference of Youth for Nigeria. Welcome, Abdulhamed. How are you feeling today?
Thank you very much. I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great, great. Thanks a lot for making out the time and sharing your thoughts when it comes to young people's role in towards the climate change drive. But let me start by hearing from you. What will be your own definition? How would you, you know, conceptualize this concept, or how would you explain this concept of net zero in a very basic term?
I think in very basic term, net zero can be seen as a point in time. Like we are set to reach net zero when the global emission of greenhouse gases is equal to the gases removed from the atmosphere. At that point, that is the point where we reach net zero.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Great, great. I like how you put it very simple. But before we get into the conversation itself, let's just have a bit of background about you, some of the work you've done in the past. Where are you speaking from currently?
I'm speaking from Lagos.
Lagos, Nigeria. Great. So just give us a little bit of overview about some of the work you've done in the past and who exactly is Abdulhamid Abenelo.
My name is Abdulhamid Abenelo Idakweji. Like you've said, I hold a Bachelor of Engineering in Chemical Engineering and a Master of Engineering in Petroleum and Gas Engineering. I actually joined YOUNGO, which is the official youth and children constituency for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change about 4 years ago. And over the last 4 years, I have been the contact point for the Technology Mechanism Working Group of YOUNGO, and I've also been an active member of the Energy Working Group. And I've helped to contribute to the Global Youth Statement, which was submitted to the Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, I think last year in November during COP27. So in the last few years, actually, I've worked on some researches on renewable energy and their contributions to climate change in Nigeria, and also the role of climate change in food security in Nigeria. So I think those have been published recently, about a month ago. And I also work on researches in the energy sector, majorly trying to remove carbon from the atmosphere, that's carbon capture and sequestration, and how it can be trapped in underground formation for underground geological formation for either reuse or, trapped there permanently. So that is what I've been doing in the last few years. Then recently I got selected as the country contact point for the 18th United Nations Conference of Youth, which is upcoming in November 26th to 28th. Just before.
But what does that mean? What will you do in this role? Just to
in this role, that means I'll be leading the delegation of youth for the UN Climate Change Conference of Youth, which means I'll be the lead for the position youth statements in the country. And I think some few days ago or some few weeks back, let's say about 2 weeks back, the local conference of youths already took place in I think Ogun State. Yeah, although I wasn't informed about it, but I just found out and joined them online to see what was going on. But it already took place in Ogun State. Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago. So I'll try to gather information on youth position relative to climate change from Nigeria, and what are the youth saying, what do they want, and how can the statement be fed into the global youth statement for COP28.
Perfect. I mean, we'll talk a bit about COP28 in a bit, but just before that, I also am like you. I'm very curious to see what this conversations was like, and to also see how this forms into not just COP28, but also, what is happening in Nigeria, what the Nigerian Council for Climate Change, for instance, the Department of Climate Change, what exactly it is they're bringing to the fore. But let's get into the conversation right now. Young people in Nigeria, I mean, we're more than half of the population. and we're talking about somewhere around 100 million people if the statistics are right. That's a lot of people, a lot of force, a lot of potentials that can, be useful regardless of where we put them, for good or for bad. And when we talk about climate change, young people are also at the forefront of experiencing these challenges. And this is why, as a young person myself, I'm always curious, how can young people be more meaningfully engaged in conversations around climate change, climate action? So that would be my first question to you. Looking at it broadly, before we narrow it down to net zero, how do you think young people in Nigeria right now can be more meaningfully engaged in being part of conversations that has to do with climate change?
Okay. I think it depends on your personal point of view, in the sense that some people already, like from what I'm about to present, that's when we get into the conversation of net zero. Some people already are familiar with the term of climate change, and they're already familiar with what it means, how do we go about it. But I think it all goes down to your personal contribution. What can you do by yourself to do it? Because no one is going to come to tell you that, oh, come, we need to involve you in this. You need to have done something prior to that time. You need to be actively engaged in conversations, in actions before. It's not only about conversations, it's not only about advocacy. You need to have done something. You need to have, if you're, for instance, if you want to, if I were, let's say, the Director General of the National Council on Climate Change, and you come as a youth to say, oh, you need to support us to do this. I need to see what you've been doing in the past. I need to see, you need to have a track record of work before you can say, oh, support us with this. We are about to do this. This is what we've done in the past, and this is what we've been doing. So I think young people should seek partnerships amongst themselves, and, to be able to come up with strategies, solutions, and others to be able to meet the, let's say, either mitigation or adaptation strategies for climate change. And when I say strategies, it's not about, most people think it's always about advocacy. You need to speak up, yes, you need to speak up, but then what are you doing personally about this? What have you done in the past about this? For me, for myself, I could say, oh, I've worked on a series of researches, and I'm trying to gear up a strategic focus for the research to be included in current work done. I've even tried to develop a novel solvent for the carbon capture process, like to aid effective carbon capture from the atmosphere. So you need to have done something. You need to see what you're doing before you get support from somewhere. So that is what I think should be. That's what I think. That's how I think young people can be actively engaged in this. Just try to get something doing. Find the focus. Find where you are useful before you could come out to say, "Oh, this is what we want."
Interesting, and I think you made a very important point there. It reminds me of so I was listening to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres a few days ago, and he talked about how young people are driving this change beyond advocacy, how young people are like creating green jobs for themselves, how they're exploring a lot of entrepreneurship frameworks to build their competence. And I think that's the same point that you make here. But now let's get back into the conversation of net zero. For those just joining, or for those that will be listening, the conversation today is pretty much simple and direct. What are young people's contributions to achieving net zero? I know you've prepared some presentation, or you have some highlights you want to put forward. So I'm just going to give you the floor to do that over the next few minutes. And I may interrupt you with some questions. Yes, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I could share my screen.
Yes, I can give you that, right. Let me know if you can now.
No, I can't.
How about now? Maybe it should work now.
Yeah.
Great.
don't know if you can see my screen.
I should see it in 1, 2. Yes, there it is. Yes, we can see your screen, so you can take it up from there.
Okay. So today's topic is young people's contribution to achieving net zero. And my name is Abdelhamid Abenelu Idakweji. I'm the country contact point for the 18th United Nations Climate Change Conference of Youth. And we are going to look at the table of contents, which is introduction to climate change. I mean, for you to be here, I assume that you already know what climate change is, but we need a little bit background on the introduction to climate change to be able to gear up a conversation for the concept of net zero and, of course, today's topic, young people's contribution to net zero. So, okay, I actually expected a group of audience to be here. That is why this question came up, like, what do you understand by climate change? So I wanted a response from the audience or something to be able to know their understanding of climate change. So in any case, maybe you are going to answer that question, Shady, sorry, but what do you understand by climate change?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And also Munir is here, Olumide is here, but most of the audience get to watch this on Facebook, on other platforms, YouTube, where we share this. What do I understand by climate change? A layman definition would be that the things that we see around in our environment is changing, and that is linked to the fact that the things that we do not see is also changing. And that's pretty much how I like to think of climate change. I mean, floods is increased, number of floods in different parts of the world, high rates of deforestation that we see around us, increased temperature that we feel. These are the things we see, and then we can then understand the science behind these things we see and be like, okay, it's because there is some sort of global warming, there's some emissions that are increasing, and that is what is being translated to these things that we see. So that's how I like to think of climate change, and that is, to put it very simple.
Okay, that is actually a very fantastic idea of climate change. And before we go forward, I also wanted us to watch a little video, about 2-minute video of the idea of climate change, what it's about, to get a visual understanding, because it's not just about the abstract. You need to know, you need to see for yourself what is happening in the environment. It's actually just a 2-minute video. Don't know if I can.
Yes, please. It's not showing yet, just to mention.
Okay. Is it showing?
No, but if you put the link in the chat, then maybe I can play it from here.
Okay.
Okay, I will just while we wait for you to do that, I will just say thanks a lot again for joining and for being a part of today's conversation. It is the second in the series, which we've called the Net Zero webinar series. And today we have the pleasure of having with us Mr. Abdelhamid Abednego as our guest. Abdulhamed is the contact point for Yongo's. Let me put it right now. Just a minute, and now I lost it. But Abdulhamed works with the Yongo, which is like the youth arm of the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Conference, and is currently the country contact point person for Nigeria. And he's been speaking to us on young people's contribution towards net zero. And in a few minutes, we will get to play a video as part of his presentation. I think I got it here now. Okay, great. Here we go.
Now, we're facing a man-made disaster.
Let me know if you can see it from your end.
Yeah, we can.
Great.
Right now, we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. The world's people have spoken. Their message is clear. Time is running out. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now is 50% higher than it was in 1900. And not only are we piling in more and more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but we are chopping down the forests of the earth at a great rate. And the forests themselves are the most efficient consumers of carbon dioxide that there are on Earth. We're going to destroy the ground because the soil of a rainforest isn't very good. We are actually tampering with the climate of the Earth and with the very atmosphere that we breathe. When we talk about the disappearance of the ozone layer, we don't know what will happen when the ozone layer goes. The world has become so fragile that we cannot subject the Earth to the tortures we can now inflict upon it. When we talk about the greenhouse effect, we're talking about something that affects the entire world. And these problems are life and death problems. They go to the root of the viability of the planet itself.
I think we can stop the video.
If there's one thing that is biologically certain about the human species is that it is a human species, one species. If we don't stop the destruction of our natural world, nothing else will. Simply put, if we don't protect nature, we can't protect ourselves.
I think that is the end of the video.
Great. So back to you. Thanks for that intriguing presentation, but back to you now.
Yeah, so that is actually just a visual understanding of what is happening around the globe. And this is not just, I understand that this video was made some years ago, I think 2021 or thereabout, but right now, I think in Canada, they are experiencing wildfire all across the province of Alberta and other provinces. So this is not just something of the past. So we are going to, without wasting much time, we are going to delve into today's presentation, which is Introduction to Climate Change. That is the next topic in line with the table of contents. Introduction to Climate Change. We can't talk about climate change without talking about global warming. As you all know, global warming is the increase in Earth's average surface temperature due to greenhouse gas buildup. So the circle is greenhouse gas emission, global warming, then climate change. So it's a circle that revolves around the same thing. Greenhouse gas emission, we emit, global warming happens, then climate change is next. So what is this climate change? Climate change is increasing changes in the measures of the climate over a long period of time. Yeah, that includes precipitation, temperature, lengthening of seasons, and wind patterns. When we say lengthening of seasons, we are referring to maybe a change in the time of rainfall or the time of the seasons of the year. For instance, I think prior to now, rainfall in Nigeria starts around April and ends sometime around August. But now, in fact, like we are still experiencing rainfall. Sometime last year, we still experienced rainfall till around November or even early days of December. So that is the change in the weather patterns and the seasons we are talking about here. And that results from climate change. So like I said before, the cycle of climate change refers to greenhouse gas emission. You have to emit greenhouse gases first, then global warming, then climate change. Then this is also a pictorial representation. We emit the emission, the greenhouse gases traps the heat from the sun and it emits it back to us when the sun goes down. So what are the causes? Technological advancement powered by fossil fuels have increased the levels of heat-trapping greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So when we say technological advancement, we are referring to the likes of power plants. Those are the technological advancements that have been powered by fossil fuels because power plants utilizes coal and fossil fuels like oil and natural gas. Usually natural gas is used to power the turbines of power plants to generate electricity and heat. And I think it contributes about 46% to the greenhouse gas emission in the atmosphere. So that is one of the major points. And these greenhouse gases, we keep saying greenhouse gases. What are examples of greenhouse gases? So one of the examples is carbon dioxide. Then another one is methane and nitrous oxide. This carbon dioxide, these are the core examples, and then we have the fluorinated gases aside. So although these gases are not entirely useless, so they have their uses industrially, they actually have their uses. Like the carbon dioxide can be used for as a fire extinguisher, and it can be used in carbonated drinks. If you go out to buy Coke and like the moment you open the Coke, you hear a sound that comes out in form of a gas leaking. So that is the carbon dioxide. That is why it is known as carbonated drinks. Then it is also used for, let's say, it is used for plastics and production of rubber when you react them with some materials. Then the methane, when you hear methane, they're actually talking majorly of natural gas. Natural gas contains majorly methane, which is in some cases 70%, 90%. Other things just other hydrocarbons are just associated with the gas. So we are talking of natural gas, and in some cases, this methane also can be gotten from food waste. When you waste your food and you throw them on the floor, and the food rots there, when it goes to landfill and it rots there, it produces methane that is given off into the atmosphere. So then we have the nitrous oxides. I think the industrial use of nitrous oxides, the major use currently is for sedating patients in the hospital. Like if they want to carry out an operation on you and they need to put you to sleep, this is the content of what they are giving to you. So these gases have their industrial use, but still they cause they are hazardous to the environment and causes a lot of issues. So they drive climate change, bringing extreme heat, drought, sea level rise, and unpredicted weather events with potentially disastrous effects to humanity. So now that we have familiarized ourselves with the concept of climate change, so let's look at the concept of net zero. What is net zero? When do we reach net zero? And how do we reach this net zero that we're always talking about? I'm sure a lot of people must have heard net zero severally, but I mean, the concept, the understanding of net zero is something that needs to be discussed. So when we're talking about net zero, we are referring to a balance between the amount of greenhouse gas emitted and the amount removed from the atmosphere. Like I said before, if the amount emitted is equal to the amount removed from the atmosphere, we are said to have reached net zero. So that is the basic explanation to it, or definition to it. So this, if you go to the industry, you actually see this happening. These long things here are the stacks. The stacks emits, like, that's where the greenhouse gases are emitted through into the atmosphere. Majorly in the industry, the greenhouse gas that they majorly emit is carbon dioxide in most industries. And some of them are emitted by, let me not say by chance, but by, let's say, for instance, in the oil industry. I'm using the oil industry because that is my field of, that is my field of. In the oil industry, natural gas exists separately from oil in some cases, but you can never have oil existing without natural gas. You can have natural gas existing on its own without oil, but you can't have oil existing without natural gas. So wherever you see crude oil, there is always natural gas. That is one thing you must keep in mind. But this natural gas is called associated natural gas because it is not in commercial quantity. The cost of producing the natural gas that is associated with crude oil is more than the amount they are going to recover from it after they make use of it. So those natural gas that is associated with crude oil, in most cases, what happens, they flare the gas into the atmosphere. That is why you see, when you go to the oil industry, you see something burning at the top. You see something, they are trying to flare the gas away and extract the crude oil from the association. So this happens, and like I said, natural gas majorly consists of methane. So as you're flaring it to the atmosphere, you are flaring methane to the atmosphere. And it's, of course, it is trapped there. It's not going anywhere. It keeps, and Nigeria, according to research, Nigeria flares the most gas in the world. Like, Nigeria is the country that flares the highest level of natural gas in the world. So this has been a problem over time. I think since we discovered it in 1956, like, that has been the trend, to flare the gas that is associated with crude oil. So that is the problem associated with the industry. And some of these greenhouse gases are flared from cement industries and other industries like the power plant industries. Then the state in which, so net zero can also be defined as the state in which global warming stops. That is in the basic concept. And now, according to United Nations, we are to limit increase in global temperature well below 2.0 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial level, and to curb the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees, as in accordance with the Paris Agreement. First of all, some people on this platform would like to ask, oh, what is even the Paris Agreement? What is it about? What happened? So the Paris Agreement is a legally binding document, like, it's an internationally legally binding treaty that was signed by 196 parties to the agreement, that they should keep the temperature well below 2.0 degrees above pre-industrial level. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by 2.0 degrees above pre-industrial level? So let's say before the advent of industrialization, let's say before the discovery of crude oil or the advent of industrialization, the temperature of the world was like 22 degrees Celsius. That is, in assumption, let's assume it was about 22 degrees Celsius. So 2.0 above pre-industrial level means that at each time we are pursuing to keep the temperature at 24 degrees Celsius since there is industrialization now. We've already accepted that, oh, we cannot do without lights, we cannot do without electricity, we still need these things to be able to keep up for some time before we talk about the final transition to renewable energies. But how do we cope? How do we survive before this time? So that is what this document is talking about, to keep the temperature well below 2.0 degrees Celsius and to pursue what in the future, like to keep pursuing the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. But to, at the moment, to keep it below, well below 2.0 degrees Celsius. And, you know, for, let's say in Nigeria now, currently, let's say I'm living in a rural area where there is no light. I'm going to survive. That is Nigeria for you. That is Africa, in fact, not Nigeria. That is Africa for you. If you put me in a place that there is no electricity, there is nothing, I'm going to survive. I'm not going to die. Like, even if there is cold there, I'm going to survive. But now, what happens in the European countries? What happens in these countries? Their life depends on this electricity. What happens when you take electricity away from a country like, let's say, a cold region like Russia, or a very cold region, let's say Canada? What happens? Hypothermia sets in. You see them shivering and you see them dying. Like, their life actually depends on this electricity. So while you are fighting for climate change and you are saying, they are fighting that, oh, our life depends on this thing, we can't just face this thing out at the moment. We need to find a way to curb this, pending when we smooth transition into renewable energy sources. So when do we need to reach net zero? So the question of when we need to reach net zero is arising because we need to have a particular time frame to see that, oh, what is going to happen below. If we reach net zero below this time, what is going to happen? And if we reach net zero above that particular time, what is going to happen? We need to have a definitive time for the net zero target. So now, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level depends on CO2 emission reaching net zero between 2050 to 2060. That is according to research, it depends like that we reach net zero between 2050 to 2060. And why does it depend on this? Let's look at why. Why does it depend on reaching this? Now, this is a global timeline. This is the global timeline to reach net zero. And what this is showing us is that to reach net zero between 2050 and 2060, according to research now, reaching net zero earlier in the range, closer to this 2050, let's say around 2051, 2052 to 2053, allows us to avoid the risk of temporarily overshooting the global temperature above that 1.5 degrees Celsius. And now, if we reach net zero at a later date of, let's say, at a later date within this frame, let's say 2057, 2058 to 2059, what happens? It almost guarantees surpassing the 1.5 degrees Celsius for a period of time before global temperature can be reduced back to a safe limit by what? By carbon removal. That means for a very long period of time, we are going to have to bear with the fact that we cannot come back down to 1.5 until the carbon removal is intense, like is removed for a period of time. So now, how do we reach net zero? For companies, let's assume that for companies, because even if you want to do it alone as an individual, your contribution, because the major cause of the issue are from the companies and the major emission is from the companies. So you have to tackle this, problem industrially first. And so how do we reach net zero? For companies now, let's say you are working in a company and you don't even know anything about net zero and you want to tell them, oh, we need to pursue net zero rates in this company. What happens? the companies have to account for their emission, and they have to track the emissions to be in line with the carbon budget. You know, like the Climate Change Act was passed in Nigeria in sometime around November 2021.
Yes, that's right.
The Climate Change Act was passed sometime around November 2021. And in this act, what are they saying? They are trying to establish a plan to reach net zero between like an action plan to reach net zero between 2060 and between 2050 and 2070. So that is actually the timeline that was given to be implemented by the National Council on Climate Change. And these action plans are to be established by the Ministry of Environment and National Planning. But I'm very sorry to say that we are lagging behind in Nigeria relative to meeting net zero emission. Why am I saying this? This is because although like they already, I mean, it's a good policy. We are very fantastic in policy making. It's a good policy, but how about the implementation of this policy? What happens when the implementation comes to play? Now, for instance, you're saying that we need to reach net zero between 2050 and 2070, and there is already a document, a policy relative to that. But now, the Director General of the National Council on Climate Change that is meant to drive this action plan was only appointed in July of 2022.
Mm.
Whereas the carbon budget and the action plan are to be made public in November of 2022. And that is not even the most interesting part, right? That is not the most interesting. The most interesting part is that now the carbon budgets are supposed to be published and the action plans are supposed to be published in November of 2022, right? But the original plan, the working plan for the organization, the NCCC, the National Council on Climate Change, that is meant to drive this action plan, the working plan was only approved by the former president in February of 2023. So you can see that we are seriously lagging behind in this race. So, but okay, I've mentioned carbon budget severally. What do we mean by carbon budget? That is a kind of emission quota that is set for various countries, various companies to meet the net zero risk.
Mm.
So when we are talking of emission quota, some companies actually emit more than that. How do they do this? Like, let's say they set an emission quota to emit 1.7 gigatons of CO2 in a particular country, depending on the industrial processes happening in that country. How some countries still emit more than this. What happens? How do they do this? There is something known as carbon trading. So the carbon trading, they buy emission quota, like they buy credits, they buy carbon credits, like we refer to it as credits. Let's say a country has lower emission rates, like they'll pay you that, oh, don't emit to your limits, allow us to emit the rest because we are the ones producing this. So you need to, as a company, you need to account for your emissions and track the emissions. So the next thing we are looking at is renewable energy and energy transition.
And I'm just going to jump in there because we have about 15 minutes to round off. So if you run through this, then we can have a bit of focus on, young people particularly.
Okay, so we have the renewable energy and energy transition, then we have sustainable packaging in those companies. I'm just going to run through this. We have waste recycling, management, circular economy. When we say circular economy, it means that you should bring, it means that initiative for recycling materials. If there are incentives, if you bring this material and I give you so amount, you return it, and or that the materials that you are no longer using, you bring them. And so we have point source carbon capture, that's the removal of carbon dioxide from the industry, and we have direct air carbon capture, that is removal of the carbon that we've already emitted to the atmosphere. There are actually industrial processes currently going on to do that. So now go to net zero for individuals. You reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle. Of course, you clean up your environment, then you plant native species. When we say you plant native species, we are talking about planting trees and planting other green materials like trees anyway, planting trees. And these trees, of course, through photosynthesis, they utilize the carbon dioxide. They are meant to take in the carbon dioxide and bring out oxygen. So that's what I mean there. Then when we say eat more vegetables and waste less food, of course, when you throw your food to the ground, when you waste foods, the food goes to landfill. And when the food decomposes there, or when it rots, it produces methane, which is given off to the atmosphere. Then also you save energy and home. You save energy at home, and you change sources of energy. That's you save energy. Then you walk, you bike, or take public transport, or use an electric vehicle where you're going. Why is this? This is because we can't have so many vehicles on the road at the same time. You're contributing to the emissions and all that. Then young people's contribution to net zero. How can young people contribute to this net zero that we're talking about? So you have to get informed. You have to, every sector has a pathway to net zero. So you have to find out the sector that you are, the particular sector that you are, you have to find out how they can contribute to net zero in that sector. And secondly, to advocate for change. Now, you have to push your company. If you're working in a company, you have to push your company, your organization, or even someone you know in an organization to set a net zero target and lower emissions. Then 3, to join a coalition, you have to work with others in your sector to develop and share net zero innovation and policies. So that is what I mean by join a coalition. Then make a change in your own lifestyle. Just like from the previous slides, you have to reuse things, you have to recycle things, you don't just litter things about and all that. So, we acknowledge that most change is within a fixed system, right? But shaming people and blaming people would not solve the problem. So you have to make change in your own lifestyle. So forging partnerships to facilitate just transitioning towards environmentally sustainable economy. So you have to forge partnerships. It doesn't mean that you have to go and look for how to meet UNDP or to meet another organization to give you funding. We are already a group of young people with the same goal. So we can come together. We are stronger together than divided. We can come together and try to form partnerships to achieve our goals. Then upskilling and reskilling. You don't just stay stagnant maybe after studying. For somebody like me, I studied petroleum and gas engineering. I just don't say, oh, I must work in the oil industry, I must do this, I must do that. Because you have to upskill, you have to reskill yourself. As the transitioning is happening, you have to change with the transition for green jobs and green skills. So before I end the presentation, I would like to say the earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. And that was said by Mahatma Gandhi. So that would be the end of these slides and presentation.
Wow, this is fantastic. I'm literally clapping my hands because it's like a master class of its own. Thanks for going deep, for explaining all the depth. But if you don't, if you could just go, 2 steps back before you close this, I just wanted us to engage a bit further on the bullet points you shared on how young people can really engage. I think these were really practical terms, yes, right there, of how we have to get informed. This is also one thing that I keep saying. If you want to act, the first place to start is to gain knowledge. Know as much as you need to know about the subject. You also talk about being advocates. I know in the earlier part of your presentation, you talked about how it doesn't have to be just advocacy, but we cannot take away the fact that advocacy is also a very strong part of the full value chain. And advocacy comes in different ways. It's not everyone has to be like a Greta Thunberg, standing out there, but we can do this in different forms. You also talked a lot about coalition, and that speaks to your work at Youngo also, which is like a coalition of young people, bringing young people together and making a change on one's lifestyle. This, I know it's a bit hard because we're very used to, the norm. It's like, we want our life the way it is, we want to be comfortable. So this could be hard, but this is also some exemplary sacrifice that we have to make if we want to, put ourselves forward as part of the forerunners of driving this net zero project. And upskilling and reskilling. I wish you could just, I know we tried to rush you a bit, but I wanted you to just talk a little bit about this last two parts, forging partnership and upskilling and reskilling, maybe in 5 minutes or less.
Okay, when we are talking about forging partnerships, yeah, I took a course with the International Training Center of the International Labour Organization, where they are talking about green skills for entrepreneurs and forging partnerships. So there is something they call the training of trainers. There is a program they call the training of trainers. So you can actually look into the International Labour Organization in your country, and then you try to meet them and tell them, oh, this is the program I want to key into. Then they are going to give you a form to fill and put you through on the process. So in the end point of that is to train you to have green skills that you can give to other people. You can train other people on. After training you for a particular time, I think they attached about 15 or 20 people to you that, oh, manage these people, train these people. And, you know, it spreads like that. So when we are talking about forging partnerships to facilitate just transition, you know, you can bring a group of people together to be able to achieve the common goal. So then the upskilling and reskilling, of course, like I said, there are so many sectors that are going to face out with the advent of this just transitioning, this energy transitioning plan. There are so many sectors that are going to face out. Now, what happens? We've been working in the oil industry for 25 years, and what happens when this goes off? Are you going to go back home to sit down? No, you need to continue making the money. You need to continue sustaining your family. You need to continue life. So you have to reskill yourself or to upskill yourself. You can take courses there are so many free courses on the UN pages, like the what do they even call it? It's an international training platform. I think I'm going to put this here. It's a training institution for the United Nations.
I think it's UNITAR.
Yes, UNITAR. So there are so many free courses. I think I've taken 7 or 8 of them within last year. So there are so many free courses you could take there to open you to new ideas and to, you know, upgrade your skills to move with the transitioning plan. So when they are talking about skills, you could look at something like green entrepreneurship. If, let's say, you feel like, oh, I'm not fit for this. And that is why they have something like just transitioning, because they are trying to carry everybody along as the energy transition plan is happening. We are not trying to neglect people behind us. Oh, go away, you work in the oil industry. Of course, they work there because they wanted to make money for their family, because they wanted to be able to sustain a family. So you can't just push people. If you try to do that, what is going to happen is that the industries are going to fight back. They're going to fight back in the sense that they have the resources, they have what it takes to fight you back. And there is what are they going to do? If I were the one, if I'm put in that position and you tell me that, what am I going to do? I'm going to probably purchase everything that has to do with renewable energy as a company. Let's say in Shell or if you try to put
ExxonMobil, yes,
they are going to purchase everything and create induced scarcity. What are you going to do about it? You wouldn't even see it to buy. So if you're talking about solar energy and solar, you wouldn't even see it to buy. So what are you going to do about it? So
okay, we're not trying to push some sort of monopoly, but yes, I think I get the point there. Thank you very much. We'll wrap up in a bit, but I see we have Mayowa joining us and his microphone is on. I don't know if he wants to make any contribution. Olumide also, if he has any thoughts or contributions. I'm also trying to keep an eye out on those following us on the live streaming platforms and to see if there are questions or comments that we can take. But meanwhile, I just want to say thank you very much, Abdulhamid. Thank you for these thoughts. Thank you for, like I said, it's a bumper package. You've gone into a lot of very insightful and practical steps that you've shared with me. I've learned a lot, and also to the listener, those listening right now, and those that will be listening even hereafter. I wonder if there are any last words, any key takeaways that you think we should keep in mind even after this meeting?
I think I already said that in the slides where I said Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. So that is the key takeaway word, because explaining this is a lot, but I mean, I feel like we all get the concept of what this is saying. For instance, those working in the oil industries, we are not against you. We are not trying to take your job away from you. We are just trying to, see how we can all move to a greener society and a just society for us. So that is my last one.
Indeed, and that's a very fine place to call it a wrap. Thank you so much. It's been the second in our webinar series of Net Zero, where we're trying to spotlight and trying to share information, just like Abdulhamid shared in his point. The very first place to start is to gain knowledge about the issues. And that's what we're trying to do with this Net Zero webinar series, trying to educate the public about net zero in Nigeria, and to also bring, to connect the dots, different stakeholders, different sectors, and how together we can be a part of the picture of a Nigeria that indeed will achieve this net zero. As we have penned it on paper, we hope it will also become a reality real soon. Abdulhamid, thank you so much for your time. And I do hope that when next we call on you, you'll be excited to share more of your thoughts with us.
Oh, I will. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot. This has been by the International Climate Change Development Initiative. My name is Sheikh Miadebote. I host the Climate Talk podcast, and I'm excited to have done this. Thanks to Olumide Dowu and the entire Climate Wednesday team, as we call them, for facilitating this. And feel free to watch the previous episode and look forward to the subsequent ones. We have this every last Friday of the month. And if you have questions, if you have comments, you can reach out to us through any of our social media handles. We are at Climate Wednesday on all social media platforms. Until the next time, keep learning and all the very best.